have to be McCaffrey. If he's too big a price,
it could
be Kareem Hunt.
Could be Kareem Hunt.
Woo!
And on that note, should the Browns be in the market?
Woo!
Should they be shopping Kareem Hunt? They're not using him.
Yeah, I don't think they should today. But if they lose their next 2 games, they should.
Possible.
Right, because the trade deadline's been pushed back in recent years. I can't remember what week it's after.
Yeah, I can't either. I think
we got
it's
at least
middle of
another
the year
couple of weeks.
now.
If they're 2-6, then they should absolutely trade Kareem Hunt.
Get what you can for him.
Because he's not going to be here next year, G.
What
I
do
know
you
you
get
think
for
he
him?
should, but he's not going to.
What do you even get for him?
No, I'm
not a lot.
3rd round, 4th round? I don't know.
Wouldn't
I
you
might even
take
just try to
any
get a
pick back,
player.
though, after the Watson trade where you depleted your draft
Yeah,
capital? Wouldn't you take
need
anything
picks.
back from him in that set?
Yeah, I mean, you take whatever you can get back because.
Well, yeah, I guess it would have to be worth more than the compensatory pick you would get for him.
Right.
But the compensatory pick you have to wait an extra year for. But, yeah, I mean, if you can get a 3rd-round pick, which I bet you can get a 3rd-round pick.
The benefit of sucking is that you get a good pick.
Yeah.
The Browns don't have that luxury.
No, but in the
If they finish 26th and would have the 6th pick in the draft,
That's why.
that's gone.
Think about this.
That's why that move
right.
can be so punitive
And
to
that-
this
and-
organization.
Right, but if Watson ends up being the guy, it won't matter.
But
I
that's-
feel a lot less confident today than I ever have.
That's
about
why
that.
I'm so, when people say they punted on this season, I go, no. There's no way you can punt on this season and you have draft capital in Deshaun Watson. You don't have 1st-round picks. So the thought process that you're going to just be bad and not do it.
Yeah, but G. Bush, if you're 2-6, and that's what they're staring at right now.
I get it.
You can't think that we're in this thing to win it at 2-6.
No, what I'm saying is they should have been thinking about this before the season
Oh,
started.
okay, yeah.
Right.
No, I agree with that.
Like, if you got all that.
No, I don't think they were ever punting the season on purpose.
No,
but
not at all.
I mean, I don't want to relitigate yesterday,
Yeah.
but this is the point I've been making: is when the suspension went to 11 games, you're screwed. You knew you were screwed.
Yeah.
And they didn't do anything about it. They went with Jacoby Brissett and said we're just going to ride or die with Jacoby
By
Brissett.
the way, and not that this should surprise anybody, but I think Garoppolo's looked pretty damn good this year.
Although they just lost this weekend.
he was
No,
terrible.
they did lose, but I mean, his numbers at one point, I was checking on Sunday.
Yeah.
At one point, I think he hit his first 11 throws. I don't know what the difference would have been. I feel like with great quarterback play, this team isn't 2-4. They're maybe 5-1.
Yeah, but I don't think Garoppolo gives you great quarterback play. He gives you
better.
Gives you better than what
competent
you had.
quarterback
He gives
play.
you better than what you've got.
With
you know-
Deshaun Watson, I think they're 5-1.
I would love to ask Andrew Berry. I would
We'll
love
never
to
know.
ask him, like, hey, you do what defensive tackles you had, right? Like, you didn't. There wasn't like somebody was hurt and they were bringing them back. It wasn't like you looked at the linebacking core. Anthony Walker, that hurts you, right? But I mean, you got guys that look like they come off the streets.
Yeah.
So even if you had Deshaun Watson,
Right.
what made you believe that this was going to happen? Because now you're going to at least have to find somebody to plug those holes next year.
Jason, they've clearly devalued that position like they have the linebackers.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
I don't either, but the answer to your question is, and he would never be honest, but the real question here is, what value does the organization place on D linemen, interior D linemen, and linebackers that you have so obviously neglected those spots?
Well, they did draft JOK high. Now, he may not be playing well, but they did draft
And
him high.
I still think Anthony Walker's absence has a lot to do with why JOK is
Right.
not playing well. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think linebackers across the league have been devalued.
Yes.
They have been.
And it's
They have
all,
been.
the emphasis is on defensive backs because everybody's playing nickel and dime.
Sure.
So I get that component of it. I think I understand it a little bit more. But I
the
agree.
D-line, I don't.
The tackles,
Yeah, I mean-
particularly, for 2 years now. They did this last year, too.
Yeah, I know.
Where they just get a couple
And they
guys.
had a couple good ones in the organization that they let get away.
I really liked
Ogunjobi.
Ogunjobi. Thank you.
I
lost
was
the name.
stunned when they let
Yeah,
Ogunjobi
I liked
go.
Ogunjobi. The guy who left and went to the Vikings. Man, I can't remember.
Richardson.
Thank
Sheldon
you.
Richardson.
I like Sheldon
He was a good
Richardson.
player.
It was those two moves that told me, oh, okay, so they're giving up on that position. They think that they're so strong on the bookends
And
that
they-
the middle doesn't matter.
Or they've misevaluated the guys they brought in at defensive
Well,
tackle.
Richardson
Possibly,
was
but
cut
they didn't
loose.
put a lot of capital into those guys.
No, they didn't.
They were late
Richardson-
But you
draft
can't put a
picks.
lot of capital into every position. They
No,
have to,
you know what?
It was $13 million, right? They didn't want to pay.
Well, after they signed Jadavian is when they cut
Yeah.
Sheldon Richardson.
You just made a good point. You can't go in on every position.
Yeah.
Give me a team, offensively and defensively, of above average guys without the real superstars. Obviously, you're going to need a superstar quarterback. I understand that. But the way the Bills have done this, I don't know where their weakness is. Like, you can look at, and this is not a surprise to us. It wasn't a pop quiz. Before this season started, we said, where are the wide receivers?
Yeah.
Where are the linebackers? Even with AWOL healthy, where are the defensive linemen on the interior? Everybody knew that they were deficient at these spots. Well, you got superstar defensive end here, superstar defensive end here, superstar running backs, now a close to superstar and Amari Cooper wide receiver. I think we got too enamored by the big marquee names.
Well,
and OBJ and Landry were another example of that. Instead of just going really solid like we have on the offensive line at every position, spread that wealth.
True, but they're paying a ton of money to 2 guards on the offensive line. It's not like,
and I'm glad they are.
They got stars at guard. I think
that's where you win, though.
I'll put tight end together with wide receiver. I think in terms of pass catchers, the Browns are fine. I think we made a huge deal about it.
But we're not at depth at wide receiver, though.
I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones has been good. He's been good.
He hasn't.
Yeah, he has.
He hasn't. If that's your number 2 receiver, you're going to be exactly where the Browns are, 2 and 4.
Well, I'd say he's their number 3 receiver because I think I'd count Njoku.
Njoku has clearly become that guy.
Yeah.
But I just don't think we have enough depth at that position.
I think they're fine. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is fine. There's good teams with worse number 2 wide receivers than him.
They would
or
be
equal.
We would be okay with it.
Could anybody even name the Chiefs' number 1 wide receiver?
Well, you don't need to because they have 8 guys that catch the ball every week.
Yeah, they got
8.
They got Kelsey and Juju Smith.
Go look at their receiving box
Schuster's
scores.
just a guy.
I mean,
They don't have that elite standout guy,
Right.
but that's to my point.
Right.
My point is, if you've got 6 guys in that room that are capable of on any given day catching 10 balls, how many guys do the Browns have right now that are capable?
I don't think they have. I think Tyreek Hill's really old. I mean,
look at their
Travis
at their distribution chart. It's insane.
Yeah, but nobody's catching 10 balls besides.
They don't because they don't need them.
Right, but none of those guys. Donovan Peoples-Jones is as good as any of their receivers.
I like DPJ this year.
I think he's played well.
I think he's becoming the guy that we thought he
beyond
was.
him, I agree with you.
Such a drop off after.
Beyond him, I agree with you. David Bell's been on a milk cart.
Why don't you believe?
Can't find him.
The way I look at it like this is, I think that Coach Stefanski, and this is just my critique. I think Coach Stefanski has an issue with finding ways to get his best people involved. Even when you go back to Odell Beckham Jr., they couldn't find him. They didn't really spot shadow him. They just couldn't really do it. We said, well, maybe Baker's better spreading it around. Now you get to a point now where you look at Kareem Hunt's, carries. If you are going to say that Nick Chubb is on a pitch count, then that would mean if you're still a running team,
that you give more to Hunt.
The carries that you don't give to him, you give to Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, that didn't happen Sunday.
But you still see that Kareem Hunt's not getting the ball. So my thought process is, what is your philosophy? If you're just saying our philosophy is to be a run-first team, yet you're not distributing the carries to your second back that could really pay dividends, then I'll ask the question, what are we doing?
Well, I mean, I think Kareem Hunt's got a decent amount of carries before this week.
No.
And Nick Chubb is number 2 in the league in carries.
I don't know. I don't think that he's used them well at all.
I used him well. I agree with you. I don't think he's been a part of the offense. I would have liked to be a bigger part of the offense, especially this past week.
Let's specifically match the Browns' offense with the Ravens' defense and how they attack them. And by the way, since Wink Martindale has left and clearly taken his acumen where he went, the Ravens' defense, I was stunned when I looked up these numbers. I knew they weren't good, but it's been a long time since we've seen a Ravens defense ranked 25th in yards per game and 20th in points per game. The Browns offense, guys, it doesn't feel that way because they're sitting at 2 and 4. The Browns offense, 4th in yards per game, 7th in points per game. On paper, and I know they play it on grass, on paper, the Browns should be able to roll 30 on this Ravens defense. How do they attack it, Jason? How do they start?
Well, the Ravens last year, it was the first time I've ever seen with my own eyes sit in a press box a game where a defense put 9 in the box. Baltimore put 9 in the box against Baker last year and said, you can't throw the ball. We don't think you can throw the ball. Try and throw the ball. And they couldn't. They couldn't do it.
They were right.
And I would suspect that we're going to see something similar Sunday. Right. They were so aggressive at trying to stop Nick Chubb, again, going back to the conversation we had yesterday, Every team tries to do it. Bill's just better at it than most. Well, the Ravens totally sold out last year to the run and put 9 in the box and forced the Browns to try and beat them throwing the ball. I would suspect we're probably going to see something similar on
they
Sunday.
did that against the Giants last week because the Giants, similar to the Browns, don't have a good quarterback right now. They have a great running back in Saquon Barkley, the only guy who has more carries than Nick Chubb. And Saquon had like a good game, but not like he had 88 yards, but it was on a lot of carries.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a great game. I watched a little bit of it later, and I saw the Ravens play against the Bengals the week before, and the Bengals are not running the ball very well. But I just think, first of all, as you said, Wink Martindale's not there, so their defense is different.
They still have the film. They still know what works.
Right, but
I know, but it's different.
they don't have the talent up front that they've had. The Ravens don't have the talent up front. But they haven't been easy to run on so far. Like Barkley, again, the Giants, but their defense 4 weeks in a row, the Ravens, has completely, like the Browns, has fallen apart in the second half.
Yeah.
They have blown in the last 4 games, they're 1-3, and they have blown a double-digit lead in all 4 games. 3 ended up being losses. The one against the Bengals, they did come back and win on a game-winning field goal.
I think
they've got their problems, too. They're not playing that
Everybody in
great.
the division is
I'm going to tell you
flawed.
what. And I told myself before I came in here today, and you know what? I'm no longer looking at any of the previous stats for what the teams do before they come play the Browns.
Yeah.
I could sit up here all day and say, well, they're struggling too.
Because the Chargers were 32nd in run.
The Browns no longer have the luxury of looking at stats from other teams because obviously those teams are better than we are. If you look at their schedule, look at who they played. We know the Jets is 4-2, right? Mm-hmm. So they played the Jets. They won that football game. Dolphins, we know what the Dolphins looked like when Tua was here. They were a much better team. Now he got a little hurt.
They lost that game.
But they lost that game, and the Dolphins are good. The Patriots,
that's one of the games that blew big
hugely.
We just saw the Patriots. We know what it is, and they played with a third-string quarterback. They've won that game. Then you go to the Bills. They lost to the Bills by 3. We just got done talking about how the Bills is smoking everybody. They lost that game. They played the Bengals. They came back in that game. So you look at the people that the Ravens have played compared to what the Browns have played. They play a better schedule. They played marquee names. They've been close in all those games. And we are now trending till we get beat by Zappies, not Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's hard to have a lot of optimism for the Browns right now.
No.
But I guarantee you in sports talk radio in Baltimore and Cincinnati, they're having the same conversations about the team being disappointing. Maybe not to the degree that we are, because the Browns are 2-4 and those teams are 3-3. But those teams went in with higher expectations, at least early, because they had their quarterbacks, and the Browns don't. Yeah. So those teams have their issues too. Can you name a wide receiver right now in the Ravens? Can anybody?
No. Duvernay.
Bateman.
Bateman's hurt. I don't know if he's playing this week. He hasn't played.
He's missed the last couple.
He's their best
still
receiver.
On the team.
He's their best receiver, and he's just at this point he's okay.
Hey, he's on my team.
Be
nice.
Let's be clear.
By the way, you beat G.
Yeah.
Could we name any receivers on the Patriots going into Sunday's game?
No. We're not using. We can't use that no more.
Yeah.
That's
Guys,
done.
I still don't know.
We're analyzing a game. We still have to bring these things up. I'm not saying it might not turn out to be that big a deal.
This Ravens team was
35-14
on Miami.
Yeah.
And blew it in the fourth quarter, 35-14.
Yeah.
So I think
blew a lead to the Bills.
Like Cleveland.
Yeah.
They're not as concerned offensively because as long as you have Lamar Jackson, he could, go Yahtzee any game of the week.
He
doesn't
can.
matter.
And he hasn't played great the last couple of weeks.
And the Browns have done okay.
They have done okay.
They have. Let's hope that continues. The way the defenses look this year.
I know.
The defense of the Browns is ranked, I think, 30th this year.
I believe they've given up more points than any team in the league.
One.
I believe they've given up the most points in the NFL.
I mean,
they may have.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, it's nothing.
They have. This is crazy that I'm sitting here saying this. This is crazy. The Browns literally, if they keep the same defenders that they have, there is no way they're winning this game. And you didn't get no D tackles this week. Clowney don't play. There is zero chance that they win this game.
Do we know what the? I have a fear that the Garrett injury is more serious than we know.
Of course, it is.
6.5. The Ravens are favored by 6.5.
Wow,
yeah, I mean, it's not like this is a 14-point game or anything. I mean, come on.
Do we know anything more about the Garrett situation?
With the shoulder?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
he's playing.
He couldn't put a shirt on Sunday after the game. I was watching him in the locker room. Like, it was one of those where he was like really struggling to get it on.
I'm afraid that that's going to end up being worse than we think.
He injured. At this point, like you could tell.
He's not
injured.
100%. Like, this is probably
injured.
something that's going to linger all year.
Yeah.
And it was a car accident.
His car flipped over like 12 times. Like, think about it. Like, and then you played a week later. I could tell immediately when he was going through the bags and hoops. He was dipping, clubbing, and ripping, and that one arm was sitting here. I said, that looked real cute. You find out a way to club and rip with one hand. That's the first thing I noticed. When he tried to go grab the quarterback and he just grabbed him and just threw him down, you could tell midway through he was like, man, I can't even really use this arm right here. And that's one of the things that you need to have as a defensive lineman is to be able to get off blocks, is to punch and release. He can't punch.
It feels like another season. We've had so many with this team that started with so much optimism. And just here we are, we're going into week 7, and we just feel like it's all up in smoke yet again.
Man,
It all could change in 1 week.
I was never that. Were we really optimistic?
We didn't pick them to make the playoffs.
No, here, I'm talking about before we knew it was going to be 11 games. When we thought, remember initially it was 4, we're like, what?
It was 6, wasn't it?
No, originally when the thought was he's going to get 4 games.
Yeah.
And I think that's what management was banking on. Let's get through
that's
4.
fact.
You got him for 13.
4 to 6 was the range they were kind of thinking.
It ends up that we lose him for 11, and it just so that was the first domino.
Yeah.
And then the Garrett thing and the poor play and the blown leads, and it's just like from where we were, I wasn't thinking Super Bowl, but I was thinking this team could make the playoffs.
But you gotta,
even when the 11-game thing came out, 6-5, Watson rides in and saves the day.
But
no.
When you look at the defense, that's why it's so egregious. That's why I'm so up in arms, because you knew what it was. Jacoby Brissett, for the most part, is playing above his pay grade. He had interceptions, but here's the thing. When you down that many points, you throwing the football. So for the defense, they were supposed to come in here and be the strong suit. And then it was like, maybe, I don't know why they think Deshaun Watson helps you tackle. Or Deshaun Watson's going to make you.
Deshaun Watson can. Don't you agree if they had Deshaun Watson, they'd be 4-2 at least, if not 5-1?
I don't agree with that.
All their losses were close except for this last game.
But here's the thing. They didn't lose those games because of the offense.
I know they didn't lose because of the offense.
They lost because of late interceptions when they were driving to try and win the game.
Deshaun Watson is so much better than Brissett that he could have overcome the poor defense.
I agree with Bull, because how many times have we seen elite quarterbacks cover for bad defenses?
All the
Matt
time.
Ryan, I think the
All
Falcons
the
had the worst defense in the league, and Matt Ryan took them to the Super Bowl, won the MVP that year.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers has done it in Green Bay. There's also a lot of examples of quarterbacks who can't do it and overcome bad defenses, but we've had plenty of elite quarterbacks.
Even if they were
you don't
average,
talk about the defense when the quarterback's that good.
I get that. But even if they're average, this team defensively is one of the worst defenses in the league.
They have been, yes.
So even if they would have played average, we could have won some of those games. Average.
And they were talking about, G. Bush, they were talking about being the top-ranked defense in the league.
Yeah.
They're like
That's where we all over-speculated on this team. We were buying what they were selling, and it was fool's
I think ultimately the biggest disappointment is the secondary. Because that was where we knew there were problems at defensive tackle.
I agree with that.
We knew linebacker was, so-so.
We expected them to be good.
Right, but we thought the secondary was going to be sensational, and it's been hideous.
And if you want to drill down even farther, the safety,
the safety play has been
Delpit's been
atrocious.
terrible. JJ3's been terrible.
That signing's been awful.
The jet sweep. Tyvis is in our chat. He says the jet sweep. They ran a simple jet sweep with a receiver. This guy did get touched for 30 yards. And I'm looking around, and every time you see it, if you go watch all 22, watch how many times either John Johnson or Delpit are completely unblocked. And they don't make the tackle, and they're nowhere in the vicinity.
They're in the wrong place.
Right.
I don't get it. That's one of the worst signings I've seen in years.
Johnson, Delpit, Ward, Newsome have all been huge disappointments this year. All 4 of them.
They've had moments. I feel like Ward's been okay at times. Newsome's played well at times.
But you expected these guys to be top-notch, and they haven't been.
But the safes, to me, have been the biggest disappointment of the defense.
Hideous.
Now look, Jay, you talked about it. That's why when you talk about, okay, we got Deshaun Watson, we got all these other things, and you got a window, the worst thing that can happen is you figure out that somebody you thought was going to be good or an impact player turns out to be terrible.
But that happens all the time. The Browns are not unique. And by the way, like this idea that the Browns have at least, I'm not talking about years and years ago, but like in the last 10, 15 years, there haven't been that many seasons where we thought the Browns were going to be good and let us down. I mean, for the most part, we thought they were going to suck until recent years.
I thought last year they were going to be better.
Last year, certainly.
And I thought this year they were going to be
2019 to now, we all thought they was going to be good. Every year.
Every year.
Well, but 2020, I think a lot of us thought they weren't going to be as good because they disappointed in 19. So in 20, they kind of surprised because Baker wasn't very good in 19. The team we thought they'd be good in 19. They weren't.
Yep.
And then going into 20.
They were better in 20 than we thought.
In 20, they were better than we thought. And then in 21, they disappointed again. But in the decade before that, we never thought they'd be any good. In fact, that year with Brian Hoyer, when they were 7-5, that team looked like a 4-win team.
Yeah.
And they fell apart after that because
Manziel
Manziel
that
got
seems like ancient history.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in the here and now. I just think the last 3 years in general, there's been a lot of excitement around this franchise, and they have delivered a big fat goose egg.
I don't disagree. However, and I know it's easy to say, well, next year. We're going to see Watson for 6 games this year. And if he looks like the quarterback that he looked like in Houston, and he plays that way here, I think that's going to give us good reason for optimism for next year.
I think that's an even bigger assumption as we sit here today because of what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Look at the quarterbacks in 2019 that were top-tier quarterbacks. Now, I know some of this has to do with age.
Right.
But Brady, Rodgers, Russell Wilson.
They're all old.
Somehow the league has figured out what the offenses were doing, and they're unable to do it at the same rate. 19 to 16 last night. The game went to overtime. Russell Wilson 3 years ago against, I know Justin wasn't in the league 3 years ago or wasn't who he is today, but you're thinking that game's going to be both teams are going to be in the 30s. And they, for long stretches of the game, it looked like they were just figuring out what they were running.
Most of the young quarterbacks.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
you're
Watson's going to be great.
You're right. You don't know.
It's a dangerous assumption to say, he'll definitely be that same guy.
Well, no, I'm not saying it's definite. I'm saying I think it's likely. And if he is, even if he's not quite as good, if every other quarterback is not quite as good either, then if he's not quite as good as we expect him to be, it's still okay. But I don't know. Most of the guys that seem to be tailing off are older quarterbacks.
Right.
They are.
Right.
But, I mean, I expect him to be – I'm not expecting him to be great right off the bat because he hasn't played in 2 years.
You're right, the names I mentioned.
Yeah.
But even Josh Allen and Justin last night, I think he's been good this year. He hasn't been the same guy he was.
Yes.
I don't. And matter of fact, I don't think Patrick Mahomes has been the same guy.
And it's two things. Number one, with the Watson thing, I have no expectation for these 6 games when he does come back. I don't know. He could be terrible. He's been off for so long, and he's been thrown right into the deep end. He'll have some practice time leading up to it, but I have no idea what to expect. It could be awful. But that won't, no matter what it is, if it's bad, it's still not going to stain what I think of next year. Like, it's all on next year with a full offseason, full OTAs, full training camp. He's the guy. All of this
What's their
behind
cap
him.
situation, though, for next year to go out and address these glaring weaknesses?
Well,
because they can't do it through the draft.
They're 20 or 30 million over the cap right now, projected to be, but they've got 50 million in cap space that they're rolling over. So I think they'll be okay
they're fine.
on the cap next year. But
that scares me.
They need 2 defensive tackles, 2 new safeties.
Yeah, but you don't have to spend huge money on every single guy.
Remember, teams build through 2 avenues.
Right.
The draft and free agency.
We ain't got no draft game.
well,
they got no draft. They just don't have a first-round pick.
They have
It's not
draft
a
capital,
first.
but let's face it. If you take a look at the picks that the Browns have made the last 2 years,
Which we're doing tomorrow or Thursday.
where are the impact guys? And we had first-round picks in those drafts.
0.
Well, I mean,
4th down, no impact.
And by the way,
they've only had.
You can build through the draft a lot less. It's a lot less expensive to build through the draft than it is to go out and hire established players at top dollar.
Agreed,
I don't
but
know
you
what
can
they're going to
get
do
guys
free
in the
agency.
2nd, 3rd, 4th round and get good players.
You can,
in
but I
theory.
haven't seen that yet.
Yes.
So you're
Well,
hoping on something that hasn't materialized yet.
Yeah,
And-
I mean,
and it's a
elite
rookie.
players they haven't got, but they haven't had a lot of high picks,
and it takes a couple of years for the lower round
Right.
picks.
And Martin Emerson's looked really good so far.
Yeah, Emerson.
He's been
their
I
best
think
so
Emerson's
far.
been fine.
Yeah.
But I think Nick Harris was probably going to be okay, and then he got hurt. He was
Right.
a lower round pick. DPJ's been fine.
Your boy Kate
fine.
York. DPJ was a 6th-round pick.
And I think David Bell will be okay. I know he's been on a milk carton.
Oh,
I agree
God.
with that.
He's done nothing.
But receivers,
Do we know why?
Rookie receivers tend to take a little bit longer.
Not
No, but
anymore.
not anymore.
I don't know.
It used to be running backs could come
Look at
into
the
league
last
and
couple
make that
of years, though,
immediate
Jason. The
impact.
good
Look at Sky Moore. Where's Sky Moore?
No,
with
there are
Kansas City?
examples of guys that have been drafted early.
we don't know
that
that Sky
haven't made
Moore's
the
gonna be
impact.
good either.
But we've also seen in the last couple of years where guys that are rookies at wide receiver have come in.
Chris
and had huge
Olave's
years.
having a big
Olave's
season.
doing
Garrett
well.
Wilson's doing well.
Yes. London's
fair.
playing
That's
well.
fair. But I guess I was going to say, and Olave is a good example. He wasn't even a first round. Was he a first round pick?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think he was. Yeah.
So the first round picks, like George Pickens, I think it's going to be an animal. But his week to week, he's kind of up and down, up and down. Sky Moore, we haven't seen a lot of. David Bell, I'd put in that group. I think in time, back half of this season into next year, I think these guys are going to be
Yeah, I'm
fine.
not saying
hope
he's
so.
done already,
I
but
hope so.
but there have been a lot of guys because
they're
David
gonna-
Bell wasn't a 1st-round pick.
Right,
That's fair.
and going back to the defensive tackle discussion, Togiai has been a huge disappointment. Jordan Elliott's been, and I think they were probably expecting to get more out of those guys than what they've gotten. And so,
I don't
as
know
we
why.
say, they haven't addressed it. They have. They just haven't got the production that they thought they were going to get out of their draft picks out of guys like Togiai.
They
and Jordan
can't even
Elliott.
get lined up straight, and they get blown off the ball.
But the other thing that's really interesting, it's not like you would know this better, and Tyvis would know this better. I don't see any exotic schemes defensively.
No.
Thank you,
to
Jason.
fix- no, I'm not
Whoa.
talking. No, I'm not talking about.
Oh.
I'm not talking about just the Browns. I'm not.
That's
Thank
the worst
you.
water bottle toss in the history.
It was more like a
We
flop.
missed water bottle tosses.
You know I
every
ain't got
day
no
since we
arm.
started.
You know, thank you.
But no,
Talk
no,
that
no.
exotic defense stuff.
But no,
He's right.
I'm not just talking about, but as we're talking about the games are lower scoring and the offense and defenses is caught up. Well, how? Because it was obvious when offenses spread 5 wide and started playing basketball on turf. It was obvious where the change came. But I'm not seeing defensively like any Buddy Ryan schemes.
Nothing.
The defense is
Nothing.
I think it's more about sloppy offense from some teams.
You might be right because
Than
I
it is
don't.
about defense
It's
is
not
being
I
like
think it's a little of both.
it's not like you could put your finger on this is why, and it's normally you can see why, and I don't think we have the why yet.
I think the scheme of like on how you stop Mahomes and these Josh Allen and these guys that are
Yeah, but
throwing
Josh
35.
Allen's having a monster season.
I don't think he's having the season he had last year. I don't know.
He gonna throw for 5.
He's had a couple games
Last
where I
year he
looked at
threw
his numbers.
36 touchdowns. This year he's on pace to throw 51 touchdowns.
Yards. How many yards?
Last year he threw 4,400. This year he's on pace for 5,000.
How do you know on pace?
He's thrown for 2,000 yards already,
Well, damn.
right? So
yeah, I've got on my fantasy team. He's been pretty good.
He did throw for like 500 against Miami.
Well, damn.
Yeah, no, well, then listen, it all averages out.
I
but
think
still,
he
those
had
are-
yards per game.
I didn't think his numbers were over 400
yards
a game.
per game last year. Josh Allen 259. This year 330.
Wow, I wonder how much that has to do
Good
with the fact
Lord.
that they're just so much better on defense this year.
Good Lord.
They were really good on defense last year.
They weren't
actually.
top ranked. They were top 10.
I think they were top 5 though. Hold
I
on,
think we were
I'll
top
look that
10.
up right now.
Up until the Chiefs game, they were pretty good.
This is
Yeah, they were.
We-
Hey, are we going to do
Josh
the
Allen
trivia?
is the highest.
We're gonna do trivia as I'm
Oh,
looking
okay,
up
no.
this point.
Second
Give me one sec.
this dude.
Well, go ahead. You got something?
No.
Oh.
I'm just saying Josh Allen's completion percentage is better than last year.
So
he's better across the board.
He's like MVP then.
And the
Right
Bills had
now,
the number
yeah.
1 scoring defense in football last year.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
What-
Say it again.
Bills
they
had
really?
the number 1 scoring
What
defense.
about yards per game?
Yards per game. Number 1.
No kidding. I don't remember them being top ranked in both last year.
They were really good last year.
And by
I
the
don't remember
way,
them being top ranked in both.
And by the way, just think about how much the time period changes things. Go back when they drafted Josh Allen. They were in the same
were
boat
us.
as the Browns.
They were us.
They were both terrible.
Yep.
They both had the same weaknesses.
And long stretches between playoff.
And look what they did and move forward.
And
Look
look where
what
we
we
are.
did. We moved forward. And you can see exactly
They
why.
didn't have the same weaknesses, though. Josh Allen's only weakness was his.
No.
his-
He's talking about the
Team.
organization. The Bills were
Oh, I'm
The
sorry.
Bills
when
Yeah,
they
yeah.
drafted
Right.
Josh Allen, where the Browns were.
Yes,
Obviously, they were
yes,
at the top of the
you're
draft.
right. You're right.
Jay,
But-
the big difference last year, Bills 23rd stopping the run. This year, first stopping the run.
Yeah, well, I know they're much better
That's
against
the
the
big
run.
You
difference.
got to stop the
So
run.
By the way,
I'm
Patrick
surprised they were
Mahomes also
number
on pace
one.
for more
17
yards.
points per game last year.
But they were
points allowed.
23rd against the run last year.
Man, you can't beat nobody.
Probably though, and sometimes those stats can be skewed because a lot of the Bills games they had big leads, so teams are chucking the ball all over the place.
I always judge defenses by like some of the analytics and some of the advanced stats because just going by yards is.
No, I like yards per run attempt, yards per pass attempt. That's more apples to apples because of course you would expect the Bills' passing defense to be scorched because how many games were they up 35-7?
Right. You're going to have all that
lot.
garbage time.
So-
Patrick Mahomes also on pace for a better season than last year. Although his completion
that
percentage is
surprises
down
me.
a tiny bit.
That surprised